Hey everyone, this is Nitro with update number 21, Trails of Cold Steel collaboration released on the international server for Langrisser Mobile. I am doing an update to the tier list that I started making in July. So there are two new pieces of gear and I'm going to put them in category. But before that, I'm going to make some adjustments based on some feedback that I got to last month's tier list. So first things first, once again, okay, I have to say that this is, first of all, my personal opinion, and second, this is a tier list that is meant to prevent people from wasting their challenge points because they're so rare. So a lot of items I placed in garbage tier, which you may want to purchase simply because you use that hero like crazy. But ultimately, in terms of balancing, especially for the Apex, Arena, PvP, they're garbage. At the end of the day, there's more important items to buy. So that's why a lot of items went into the garbage tier, like Shafaniel's exclusive is a perfect example. Heaven Sanction with its 5 range, you don't need that +1 range, which only has a 30% chance of triggering at all. It's nice to have occur, but you don't need it whatsoever. So that's why that exclusive went into the garbage tier. It used to be that, let's say Season 2 or Season 3, you had Shafaniel built, this item was pretty much a must-have, because if Shafaniel gets +1 range and +1 span on Heaven Sanction, that's devastating. But nowadays, not at all. Nonetheless though, due to the feedback, I am making some adjustments. For example, I added a new category, not worth 150 points. So a lot of the items which fell into garbage tier would be moved into that category, such as Emerix, because it is a good item to apply a debuff on enemies close by, but Emmerich himself is garbage. So as a result, it's not worth the points. Shafaniel's Heaven Sanction is pretty much the exact same situation. It's not garbage, but it's not worth 150 points at this time. Like if you purchased it in the past, whatever. All Meta's exclusive is the same. It's not worth the 150 points. Egbert's exclusive is interesting. Okay, right now it's not worth 150 points, but in 5 months, Egbert actually gets his 3C. And his 3C, you can compare it to Matthew's 3C. It summons a duplicate of Egbert's, but this summon has different skills. So the duplicate Egbert has the teleport skill, it has meteor skill, and I forgot what the last skill is. I don't even know what the last skill does. So since it can teleport and meteor, and that summon will also cause damage to Egbert, which will then trigger this effect, which is that when Egbert takes damage, he gets +1 range and +1 span. So as a result of this, you can say this piece of item goes from being garbage tier to maybe a must-have if you use Egbert. I can't say whether Egbert is worth using, simply because, first of all, I don't have him built, and second, it's very possible that this item would make him great, but at the same time, because of characters like Rosenseal being in the game, the AoE meta, which has been mostly countered, may make this Egbert not worth getting anyways for PvP. But for now, I'll put this item under the must-have category, but keep in mind once again, this only becomes a must-have in 5 months. Secondly, another adjustment I wanted to make was, I found out that Sigma's exclusive provides a +20% attack in int buff. So it's the same buff as a faction buff. I guess the whole point of this is that if your Sigma is not bringing a faction buff, he uses up a lot of turns due to his 1-cost skill ending his turn. So because of that, this exclusive is supposed to allow him to keep that +20% attack or int buff. But at the same time, if he's bringing a faction buff, this item is complete garbage and you're better off bringing something like a King's Crown. So whether this item is actually worth it, it's very hard to say. I think at most I can place it under the optional nice to have category, because it's truly not amazing. If your Sigma is going to faction buff himself and buff up other allies, then you won't need this at all. It's only if someone else is buffing your Sigma that he might need this piece of gear. So that's the adjustment for Sigma's exclusive. And another adjustment for exclusive I'm going to make is Dieharte's exclusive. I have a 6-star Dieharte, and what I've noticed is he can't assassinate anything. The problem is, in his assassin class, he only has a mere 6 mobility. So he would have 3 mobility regularly and then +3 from his strike skill. So that's not enough. In his cavalry class, as an assassin, he can only bring demon hunters as his soldiers. And flat out, demon hunters are terrible, terrible soldiers. What I mean by that is these demon hunters can barely kill anything, especially now that people's training grounds are fully upgraded or near fully upgraded. As a result of this, Dieharte will pretty much always fail to assassinate characters. Yes, I'm aware that Prodigal Son, his 3C skill, will activate this, but if you're trying to assassinate someone and you fail, even if you just stun them afterwards, that does not make up for it, okay? It's just that simple. So I'm going to move this piece of gear from PvP oriented to actually PvE oriented, because for people who have Dieharte built and actually use them for PvE content, being able to kill one enemy and stun another enemy is always nice to have. And Ledin's Trial of Faith, I actually don't think this is a required piece of item at all. I'm actually going to move this down to the optional nice to have section as well. And continuing on, going back to reviewing the remaining garbage tier items, first is the Silver Wolf Mask of Righteousness. As long as you have twice as many buffs as the enemy, you may attack first. I'm still going to leave this in the garbage tier, I'm sorry. It's a nice effect, don't get me wrong, but A, you really shouldn't be using Silver Wolf in my opinion, and B, at most you can say it's a PvE oriented gear if you decide to have Silver Wolf attack ranged attackers so that you take no damage when attacking. I guess that's about all you can say about it. But why? I just don't get it. So I'm still going to leave this at the garbage tier. Grenier's helmet, when he has 7 or more buffs, you get 50% more counterattack damage. Once again, I still feel it's garbage tier. Like, you should have other tanks built up, like Ledin, like Juggler, like Landius, you know, Emilia. There's so many other tanks that you're going to build. I just don't see anyone ever purchasing this, so I'm still going to leave it at the garbage tier. Sorry, I just don't see anyone ever using Grenier as their tank at this point in time. Especially when, in order to use Grenier as your tank, you're going to need like an extreme magic bow and him in his bow knight class. There's just so many issues with using Grenier. Theoretically, you can say it's PvE oriented, but I still think it's a garbage tier item. Next up then is Lance's Crown of Kalsaf. So this one is when he's in mixed forces, damage dealt is increased by 20%. You basically, if you use it, you have to bring Heaven's Guard on Lance. So you're killing his flyer mobility, making him a cavalry character. I just think that's incredibly awkward right there. The only way I can see this being worth using is if you were playing rare and SR tournaments and wanting to bring Lance for one-shotting targets or something. But even then, it would only work in certain maps, so I'm still going to leave this one in the garbage tier section as well. Serena's Dawn Guard. It basically falls under the exact same category as Grenier. If you use Serena for whatever reason, this item is useful, but realistically, there's so many SR tanks that you should have built up, so it's still going to fall under garbage tier for me. There's absolutely no reason to use it. Next up is Angelica's. Angelica's remains in garbage tier. It's just that simple. Its effect is that it allows 30% hit point heal on an allied summon with the lowest health. Why would that even matter? Ever. If you're going to use Angelica, you'd be way better off having her bring like a Tenyo's headdress to provide random buffs to allies than heal up a summon of all things. And finally, Alfred's exclusive. Once again, it's one of those situations where if you somehow decide to use Alfred, it's worth it, but otherwise, I still think it's garbage. A lot of these heroes inherently fall under a category that I will not ever consider them being worth using, ever. Because the hero's not worth using, the equipment naturally is garbage tier. I don't know what else to say. I mean, you can put this under not worth 150 points, but I just don't understand why anyone would use Alfred at the end of the day. Just like a whole bunch of these other ones. So I don't know, maybe I'll move these ones up into this not worth 150 points section. Either way, they're not items you should waste your challenge points on. Alright, so now that those adjustments have been made to the various categories, I'm now going to add in the 2 new items, which is one for Bernhardt and one for Varna. Bernhardt's exclusive has a great effect for Bernhardt, and what it does is it increases his talent range by 1. So what this means is Bernhardt will now debuff enemies 3 blocks away from him, rather than just 2 blocks. This is a major improvement for Bernhardt because being able to debuff the stats of enemies further away can very much help you. For those people who don't realize, Bernhardt's stat debuff can have a shocking effect in battle, as this clip will show. So Player 2 has Bernhardt set up in front with Zerda further back, and Zerda gets attacked by a Bloodthirster Zerda. Bloodthirster Zerda kills herself into this Zerda because it didn't have enough attack to assassinate her. Gizroth moves up and buffs, and then Illustrial jumps in as well, also to attack Zerda. And Illustrial also kills herself, with Zerda surviving with 69 hit points. So just from defending, 2 characters died. So we just basically saw that the player 2, whose Zerda was close enough to Bernhardt so that all the attackers were getting debuffed, it allowed Zerda to survive attacks and kill off enemies that were attacking her. Just an interesting video clip. I think there were a lot of if statements in that. For example, the attacker pretty much had to not have last rites for that situation to occur. Last rites with the 40% damage reduction should have allowed those heroes to survive, even with the stat buff, or even with the stat reduction. But given that circumstance, things like that can happen. So if you use Bernhardt, you really should have this gear. And generally speaking, it's fair to say Bernhardt is more PvE oriented than PvP at this point. So I'll place it here in the PvE oriented section. I feel like Bernhardt is like Lanford. Very nice for PvE content in debuffing enemies, but not really a PvP oriented character. And as for Varna's piece of equipment, well, Varna's piece of gear will actually go under... Okay, Varna's exclusive. I should explain what it does first. So Varna's exclusive has the following effect. When you're using an AoE skill, the span of that AoE skill is increased by 1. What that means is for her Wind Whisper, instead of having 1 ring, it presumably becomes 2 ring. And if you're going to be using 1000 arrows, of course, the span of 1000 arrows becomes 4 span rather than just 3. Of course, the drawback of it is that if you deal damage with that AoE skill, then it has a 4-turn cooldown. So you can't use it consistently, there is that longer cooldown on this skill, but nonetheless, having that extra span for your first AoE attack is a big deal, and it can help quite a bit. So as a result, whether you choose to bring this or King's Crown can sometimes be a tough decision, and it really depends on whether you're doing, let's say, PvP or PvE. If you're doing PvE content, I would say King's Crown is still generally better most of the time, but if you're doing PvP content, that plus 1 skill span may be the big difference. So I would place this under the PvP oriented category. And that would be it for now. So thanks for watching everyone. I hope you found this video useful to you. And on that note, Nitro out.